All right, welcome to this episode of the Brett and Ethan Show. In the last episode, we talked a lot about inflation and just kind of the reality of that this is really an issue that you need to be planning for the long haul. We talked about how Larry Fink believes that you should never retire, just work for the rest of your life. And that's a lot of wisdom coming from a guy that is the biggest asset manager in the world. If that doesn't sound like a good retirement plan to you, then maybe what we're going to talk about today will be helpful. So, Ethan, I think that one of the things we left off with last time was your father's story and how this the prevailing wisdom is, well, in order to beat inflation, I need to risk my money, right? I have to leave it in the market because if I put it into a bond or a CD or in the bank, then I'm going to get destroyed by inflation. So, what are my options? Maybe real estate's a good option. I think people may be surprised actually to see the truth about real estate and how it hedges against inflation when it comes to real estate rents. So I'll pull some of that out too. But was that some of your dad's thinking, is trying to kind of keep it at risk so that he could outpace inflation, or what was his thought process there?
Well, I think if you break it down to the most emotional level, it's my dad kept his money in some places that could get lost in 2008. He had worked for a company and he had seen it grow, like 20% per year for 15 to 20 years in the housing sector, and everything was great. It was booming, everybody was making money. And so he never believed that he would see something like 2008 because he had not seen it up to that point. And so his
Sure.
belief is, hey, I'm going to go retire and I'm just going to continue to see that same trajectory.
Mm,
Well, that happened in terms of the 2008 drop, lost 60% because, again, the housing sector got really beat up and he had a lot of his portfolio in that. So if you break it down to, I think, the most core level of emotions, it took him around 10 years to make it back. And so I think it was one of those things where he made it back and he wanted to not only make it back, but make what he believed he would have been able to make having that he had not lost it. So I think if you look at it emotionally, he's like, I just want to keep holding on to see how long I can just keep eking out these gains, even to the point where when he called his advisor says, hey, I'm glad you called me today because your portfolio is up $14,000 versus yesterday when it was down 14,000. Right. And so that's the mentality. And I said, when my dad told me that, I said, Dad, it doesn't matter where your portfolio is up and down. It's matter like if it drops 40% tomorrow, which it could do, there is a likelihood that that could happen. There is a percent chance. Why would you even have that on the table again when it took you 10 years to get that back the first time? Why would you want to go through that heartache again?
mm.
And I think that's the reason why he was just holding on, hoping to like, okay, hey, if I wouldn't have lost it, I would be here. Versus now, I'm just back to break even a little bit more.
Well, I mean, it's human nature, right? To try to make up for those losses and chasing and chasing and chasing. And the reality is, you can chase it all you want, but is that what really is going to give you the lifestyle that you want? Not necessarily. Just getting back to that magic nest egg number, whatever that is, does not produce the happiness that we know people are looking for, and that's been our experience over the course of the last really 15 years. But the last couple of years, we got serious and traveled all over the country and interviewed all kinds of retirees. And man on the street, we'd just walk up to people who were sitting in their park chairs or sitting at the beach or at any half of them were playing pickleball. So we go ask them. And one of my favorite interviews in the movie The Retirement Deception was a short interview I had with a firefighter who was walking to the beach on Lake Michigan with his lawn chair on his back. And I just said, hey, you mind if I ask you a couple quick questions? And he said, sure. And I said, what defines a successful retirement for you? And he said, mine. I was taken back by that because that's not the average answer. And I said, oh, really? Well, like, tell me more. And he's like, well, I get my social security and I get my pension from the firefighter, from my firefighter's pension. And I have more than enough money coming in every single month to allow me to do anything that I want to do. And I said, awesome. That was really cool to hear that. And then I said, so was that more valuable to you? Is that more, does that deliver more kind of happiness to you or security than just having a big nest egg, having that income come in? And he said, absolutely. He wants the income. He wants the deposit every month in the bank, because then he's like, okay, I can spend this and I'm going to keep getting it no matter how long I live. And that is what made him happy. And most of the people we talk to agree with that sentiment. Some still like to have a big nest egg, and certainly the bigger the better. I don't think anybody's disputing that. But when we go to look at, okay, how do we convert our nest egg into income? That's where we have to really address the inflation thing, because he may be doing great right now, but if inflation keeps up the way that it is in 7, 8, 9 years, he may not be able to maintain his standard of living, because Social Security isn't going up by 7, 8, 9% per year every year. And his firefighter pension isn't probably going up 7, 8, 9%. I mean, in the last episode, we showed how the real true inflation rate is over 5% every year for the past 45 years. And in some years, it's 10% or more when you calculate energy and the cost of food and everything that's really costing us money. And so, anyway, uh, it's great now because he has that income, but that's why we wrote the paper called The Fallacy of Fixed Income, is because he's on a fixed income, and that honeymoon may not last forever.
Well, that's why, as you can see here on the screen, we talked about scientifically optimizing your retirement. Here, we like to base our decisions on numbers, right? Like, okay, if my dad had kept his money and it dropped 60%, it's going to take him another 10 years potentially to make it back. Versus if it's protected, he can still have that money, right? And so it's just math, like 2 + 2 = 4. And so we want to scientifically optimize the retirement using facts and data. So in the prior podcast, if you did not listen to that, you should go back and listen to it. We talked about Michael Finke, because some people really discredit these PhDs, and not everything they put out I get is want to read, right, or might make sense. But a lot of it, though, if you look at it and if you say, okay, if there's a study that shows that if I take a portion of my money and I protect it from market crashes and it can still grow and it can allow me to spend double the amount that I am going to in retirement, and it's mathematically proven, why wouldn't I want to do that? And I think it comes back to what you're saying is some people still believe, because Wall Street has basically taught this for so many years, that the bigger the nest egg, the happier you're going to be. And
Yeah.
that's why I love the firefighter. It's like retirement really isn't the nest egg, it's the income you get. Obviously, like Brett, you said, the larger the better. But I think if you look at what Robert C. Merton talks about, it's like you get this statement, but what really that statement should show is what's the income that that's going to actually give you that you can count on a yearly basis or a monthly basis, right? And so you say, well, I can count on Social Security. Well, in baby boomer dilemma, Social Security has a high likelihood that it could go down. And so you take the firefighter, if inflation is going up 40% and he doesn't have the way for that money continue to go up, and that's back to the fallacy of
What
income,
do you
his
mean? What do you mean
purchasing
by
power.
inflation going up 40%? Or did you say four? What did you mean by that?
Well, in our last episode, we talked about that inflation went up, what, 39% over 5 years?
Oh, yeah, the cost of food. Yeah, the
Yeah.
cost of food over 4 years went up 40%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what I'm getting at is what David Babel really nailed down, which is, this is a fallacy of fixed income. You have to be very careful. We like income, we like guaranteed income, and I'm building assets that are going to give me that. David Babel really taught me that in some of the papers that I read, and we actually met him and talked to him. And he really helped me understand that you have to be careful not to put too much of all of your assets that are coming, or the income that's coming out in retirement for you, in a fixed income that doesn't have the potential to continue to go up. Because if you have, he said, two scenarios that could really hurt that, which is raging inflation and rising interest rates, which right now we have that. And
Yeah.
so you have that impacting people that have pensions and Social Security. And yes, they get that check every month or every year, but the purchasing power now is going down. Like you said, hey, I used to be able to go out to dinner with my family and it was $30. Now I couldn't find anything less than 50.
Mhm.
That's double what you saw potentially 5 years ago with food and some of these other sources of where we spend our money.
So this is the important part of thinking about this is, okay, what is really my personal inflation rate? Not what the government says, but what is your personal inflation rate? And so what is it costing you to live your life the way that you were living it 3, 4, 5 years ago? Is it 4% per year? Is it 5% per year? No, it's much more than that. And everybody knows it. The cost of oil, the cost of energy, the cost of food, like all the main stuff that keep us alive, it's gone up by double. Right. And so then the question is, okay, well, how do I factor that into my retirement plan? And if you look at just a simple fixed income calculation where you're like, okay, I'm going to go to quote unquote fixed income with bonds and CDs in my portfolio, and I'm going to try to live off $100,000 a year. Well, with inflation, I mean, all you have to do is take the rule of 72 and just do a conservative calculation and say 72 divided by the inflation rate, which is five. Let's just use 5%. That means that the amount of money that you will need in order to maintain your standard of living needs to double in 14 years for you to stay where you're at. Okay. Is the current trajectory that you're on right now with your retirement at $100,000 a year, will that be going up enough to be $200,000 a year by the time you're 14 years down the line? So if you just keep the math simple and you say, okay, I'm retiring at 65, and let's just put 15 years to keep it easy. By the time I'm 80, will my retirement plan be producing $200,000 of income now if I'm using these fixed income strategies like CDs, bonds, and Social Security? No, not even close. They're growing at 2%, right? That's what they're doing. Now, bonds right now, maybe 5, but that's not going to last. Those bonds are going to mature. And then when the, the rates come back down, you may be getting 3 or 4% or 2 or 3%, or, a couple of years back, you were getting less than 1%. So counting on that for 25 or 20, 15, 20, 25 years is silly. So the idea of relying on fixed income, see, this is the problem with the Wall Street. This is the retirement deception. You can retire successfully using retirement strategy of Wall Street, and you can't. Wall Street might be fine with accumulating, but they are not fine when it comes to churning out actual income strategies that can support you for your life, because all they're going to do is say, oh, this is the 60-40 or the 70-30 or the 50-50, move that money into quote unquote fixed income. And we've already seen what that's going to do. A lot of people can't afford to have half of their money, only half of their money producing income. So Ethan, let's talk about that for a second, because if you have a nest egg of $5 or $10 million, then this is a different conversation. But if you've saved 700,000 or $800,000, and you say, okay, I'm gonna try to use that for my retirement. Let's just give it $1 million to make it easy. The 4% rule says you're gonna take 4% of that nest egg, and that's what you can afford to live off of and not run out of money. Well, that's 40 grand a year. So can they really have a 50-50 portfolio? No, because if 50% of that's still in the market and they're only using 50% of that for retirement income, now what? They've got 20 grand a year in income while they're trying to, because I guess that's the conversation that we always hear. Well, you can hedge your fixed income with your more aggressive investing. And for somebody with $5 million, yes, that's the case. So you're okay getting 2 or 3% with your fixed income, because your other stuff may be getting 8 or 10%, assuming it doesn't crash. But anyway, what are your thoughts on that? Because it it's the it's the deception that we uncovered as we interviewed people and talked to people, is like they want you to think that a typical Wall Street mix of stocks and bonds is going to solve your problem, when for the vast majority of people, anybody with less than probably 1.5 to $2 million, it's not going to cut it.
Yeah, your question, it brought back my dad's story again, which is we talked about this a lot, was accumulation, which Wall Street specializes in, right? They have assets that help you accumulate, right? You can have money in a 401k or outside of 401k, wherever you have it, but they have particular vehicles that they have built. Yeah, they make money with the fees and things of that nature, but if you look at the models, if you keep it over time, it potentially goes up, or can go up depending on when you put it in and when you started, etc. But I look at my dad, and he actually went into retirement with an accumulation model mindset, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
was, okay, I've seen it grow that 20% every year. I don't think a market crash is going to happen. I haven't seen inflation happen. So he hasn't seen these variables that are happening now happen during the time that he was working, right? And tax rates were, they were pretty high when he started, but now he's into retirement and they're some of the lowest tax rates that we've seen, right? And so you see this, what I call the perfect storm, where you have these tsunami waves of higher taxes, inflation raging, higher interest rates. We have market crashes that are happening at faster rates than they've happened in the past. coming back to my dad's story. So he went into this model of, hey, I've got this 60-40 or this accumulation mindset, and I'm going to retire off of that. Then these things that came to the forefront that nobody really thought potentially would. I guess the smart people maybe were looking at the numbers could see that. But if I'm just going to work every day and I'm driving in traffic and I've got my kids or whatever I'm doing, I'm not getting up and looking at these things that are going to come threaten me. And so when those things happened, he lost 60% of it. And if he would have protected that, he would have not had the worry and the grief that he had, right? He was serving a mission
Right.
for his church, had to come back early because of that and got into some health issues. And so we talk about this accumulation versus decumulation. And what we mean by decumulation is when you turn off the income, we're not going to be like Larry Fink for successful retirement. At some point, I want to turn off the income and I want to live off of the assets that actually allow me to have a lifestyle, to do things that I want to do in retirement without the worry that they're going to go away. So Wall Street isn't built for actually decumulation. And you see that in Baby Boomer Dilemma, where we talk about, people that if you're going to work with an advisor or if you yourself can handle it, is learning how to actually build your portfolio so that it deals with decumulation strategies and work with decumulation specialists, because not everybody and very few actually focus on decumulation. And what we mean by that is scientifically optimizing your retirement. So when market losses happen and raging inflation there and rising interest, you're not going to lock all of your money too much into fixed income, so your purchasing power goes down, or you're not going to leave it all at risk. So if you have a market loss, then you're having to wait 10 years to actually have a lifestyle. You're optimizing it mathematically so you can actually overcome, mitigate, and even actually eliminate some of these worries that you have, or even these threats to your retirement.
Yeah. So, when you look at the assets that are good for decumulation, one of the things that, and it's not really a decumulation asset, it's an income producing asset, it's real estate. And that's one of the things that a lot of people turn to because it is cash flow and historically the property values will keep up with inflation. One of the things that is interesting though, is I've studied this and, I would say we've probably studied this and done more on this than any single other person in the entire country when it comes to this particular issue of decumulation. And whether that's working with, Robert C. Merton, Nobel Prize winner, Bill Sharp, Nobel Prize winner, a bunch of other experts, the creator of the 401k, David Babel, Moshe Milevsky, Olivia Mitchell, all of these PhDs, economists who have studied this extensively, and they all kind of agreed that you got to have a decumulation strategy. And so one of the things that it's like, okay, well, what about real estate? And when I've looked at real estate rents over the past 20, 30 years, take a guess. I'll pop quiz you here. Take a guess what you think rental inflation, the inflation of rental rates has been for the past, just say 25 years nationwide.
6%.
3%,
Wow.
just over 3%. Surprising, huh?
Yeah.
I,
So
I
in
was
terms of
surprised by that.
so in real estate, then are people banking on the appreciation of the actual asset to actually keep up with inflation versus the actual income they produce? You think?
I think that both of those things go into the consideration of, well, this is a good way to hedge against inflation because my rent rates can go up and my property values are going up. Well, guess what else is going up? Your taxes are going up.
Right.
Every single year, your taxes are going up. So, does that really outpace inflation? If your taxes go up by more than 3%, then your property value goes up by 3%, then what are you really getting? You're getting the inflation rate of your rent increases, right?
Right.
Because the value is offset by the cost in taxes. So I don't think you can call that a net positive. And I own real estate. I mean, we own probably 7, 8, 9 pieces of real estate between us. So it's not like we're not a fan of real estate. We are, but you got to be honest with yourself and say what's actually happening here. And it's not really keeping up with inflation.
Well,
It
does
might.
it really scientifically optimize your retirement, basing your entire portfolio off of real estate income?
Well, no, it's not scientifically optimized. It's a good piece of the puzzle for a lot of people
Right.
who like it, and and I certainly like it myself. But is it guaranteed? No. We've had this happen to us where the tenants don't pay. You got to chase them down or kick them out. You can go 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Have you seen all the squatter stuff going on right now?
Oh, it's
Imagine if you were a property owner in some of these states and your renters leave, squatters move in, and you can't even get them out of there.
Well,
I
did you
mean,
read the article about the lady in New York that she inherited the property? And during that time, someone had started to squat in it. She shows up and tries to kick him out, and they arrest her.
yes, this is insane. So, where it used to just be, hey, if somebody stops paying your rent, then you're in trouble. Now it's not just that. It's somebody stops paying the rent, somebody else moves in there, you're going to jail for trying to kick them out. I mean, it is just nuts. But assume that you're not in that situation and you just have somebody that's paying you rent and you've got a couple of rental properties, whatever. And now all of a sudden you're 75 or you're 80 or you're 85. I mean, if you don't have family around to handle that, what happens if stuff needs to be taken care of and you're not able to do it? So that's something else to consider. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting because people, they put these blanket statements like, oh, real estate always outpaces inflation, or real estate keeps up with inflation. And maybe it does just barely keep up with it, but your rental rates historically aren't going to like blow it away. The best thing about real estate from my perspective is that you get the income and then you get to keep the property, where with annuities or something like that, when you turn the income on and if you run that for the rest of your life, then you're down, you're decumulating that amount and there's nothing left over. And so it's a different play if you're trying to pass some assets on to a heirs or to your legacy. Then real estate can be good because it can produce the income now and then you can pass the property on, and that's really valuable. And so that's one of the other benefits of it for sure that I like. But when you're looking at, okay, can I manage this? Can I count on it? What are the risks? It's not necessarily foolproof. It's not risk free.
Well, all it does it take all it takes is one bad tenant, right? Or one bad situation, or about one bad squatter. Where if you're later in retirement and you're counting on that income, it's not guaranteed, and all of a sudden something happens,
Mm.
laws change, squatter happens, you're not getting that income. What happens then, right?
COVID, and they say you don't have to, your tenants don't have to pay you anymore. I mean, that happened to a bunch of commercial property owners. A lot of people are like, well, I own commercial, I don't have to deal with the squatter problem. Well, who would have thought that you wouldn't be able to charge rent to your renters for 3, 4, 5, 6 months in this country? Insane.
Yeah. And I think as we've created these documentaries, one of the questions we ask is, okay, what is a successful retirement? Another one that I ask myself, and I think you've done, which is like, in terms of retirement income, what is the highest A grade source of income that you can have, right? And
Right.
we created a formula. We go over that in the retirement deception. At the same time, you may think that we're bashing real estate. We're just saying, hey, there are certain grades of it, right? We like real estate. It can give us income today. It's nice. It has some huge other things that I like about it that you didn't mention, Brett. It's got some really amazing tax advantages as well if you can use some of those. So
Right.
we leverage that, we use it, we get income from it. We deal with the tenants. I manage some of these properties. We have a management company, and there are months where we don't have tenants that pay, or I'm
Mhm.
chasing down other people. And I asked myself this the other day when I was driving out there to pick up a check of someone who's 60 days late. It's like, do I want to be doing this when I'm 75 in retirement?
You're supposed to be on a cruise, Ethan. You can't be picking up
Yeah.
checks. You're going to be on a cruise.
Well, I can pay someone else to do that. Well, I don't even want to have to deal with the hassle in terms of the income that I want to count on that's guaranteed, that can actually then potentially go up and increase and be guaranteed to get locked in on those things. And so, well, I'll probably have some sort of real estate in my retirement portfolio. Yeah, I will. But it's not that bedrock foundation that we talk about in the retirement deception. That stuff is, grade A. It's guaranteed. I don't have to worry about a renter paying or not. That stuff just comes in effortlessly.
Okay, so just this last week, I took the family on a church history tour for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter Day Saints, and one of our stops was in Nauvoo, Illinois, and right across the river, you go into Iowa, and there is a steakhouse that I was referred to by a friend of mine who says he's had the best ribeye he's ever had there, and so we're like, awesome, love ribeye, we'll go over there, and it was delicious, and he's like, there's just something special about those Iowa cattle. And it was like grade A, prime, like this is prime beef steak, and it was delicious. And that's what I think you're referring to when you talk about scoring your income. The score is actually, we call it MITPG. So MITPG are the 5 pieces of that score that you can look at an asset and score it against. And the first one is it market variable, right? Does your income depend on the market? Number two, is it inflation proof? Is your income going to outpace inflation? Number three, is it tax advantaged? What level of taxation are you getting on that? Number four, is it passive? Is it literally 100% passive? Like it deposits in your bank account and you don't have to do a single thing or think about it. There are very few income sources that are that passive. The one probably most people think about is Social Security. Like it's just going to show up. I don't have to do anything for it. I don't have to talk to a renter. I don't have to talk to my financial advisor. It's just going to show up. Annuity income is that level of passivity. And then the last one is guaranteed. And so if you can get that prime ribeye steak that gives you a top score on all 5 of those, then that's the very best level of income you can get. And as you start knocking those off, where it's like, well, it's not really guaranteed, but it's pretty passive and it does have some tax advantages, but it is still at risk to the market forces. Real estate is certainly market dependent. Then it goes down on that score. And so just look at your own portfolio right now, look in there and see what you've got. You've got probably some real estate. You probably have some stocks, bonds, mutual funds, CDs. Like take each one of those assets, score it on a scale of 1 to 5 for each one of those on the MITPG system. And you'll be able to see really quickly, oh, geez, well, this CD is guaranteed, right? It's safe, but it's not keeping up with inflation because it's only paying me 2 and inflation's going at 5. So that one really doesn't, hit the scales at the very tip top. So anyway, we found it to be a useful tool, and I think everybody should take stock of their portfolio and look at that and say, okay, well, what prime income sources do I have in retirement that are going to be as juicy as that ribeye that I had in Iowa?
Yeah, and it changes how you look at your retirement portfolio. So when I look at mine, people talk about diversification, right? But they don't diversify for taxes and as well as maybe risk, right? In terms of
Mm.
market loss. Well, now I also look at it in terms of, okay, what is the diversification of cash flow producing assets that actually have the grades that we're talking about? And so when I build my portfolio, I've actually, I get a little nerdy on this, and so you don't have to do this, but you can look at it in a way where it's like, okay, I have my portfolio that's X amount, that's the total global portfolio, but inside of it, here are the assets that I hold. Okay, and of that 40% of my portfolio, if I've got the assets that are holding that top 40% or in the top A minus, maybe B plus grades, then I'm feeling pretty confident that I can scientifically optimize retirement as I move into a decumulation mode where, yeah, I'm in accumulation right now. And at some point, I'm going to stop the income coming in and I'm going to turn on the income from things that I've delayed. And I'm going to continue the income that's coming in from real estate and other passive sources. But now I look at it in terms of, yeah, I've got a nest egg, but I also, like you said, look in terms of the grade of assets that I have inside of it.
Yeah. And we probably should give people a resource on that. Maybe we'll put something together where people can download that and actually see and go through and look at all the different assets that are out there and score themselves so they get a real clear picture of that. Because ultimately, like you said, the question that we ask is what creates retirement success? And retirement success is 2 things. It's number one, being able to live the lifestyle that you are comfortable living. It is not buying Learjets and Lamborghinis. That's not what most retirees want. They want to know that if I am comfortable here living the way that I've lived for the past 40 years and I can keep living this way for the next 40 years, I'm happy, right? Most of our clients, most of the people that we work with are not greedy SOBs who are trying to take over the world and become the next billionaire. They're just trying to love their family, love their lifestyle, and do a little bit of service here and there and help out people and happy retirement. So the lifestyle locking in that lifestyle that you're comfortable with. And that's number one. But number two is the one that nobody talks about. And this is where Menahem Yari, who actually invented the calculation to prove the very best way to scientifically optimize your retirement at that time, with a known lifespan, and also without the to give money to your heirs, which obviously all of that comes into play. But anyway, he created the calculus that figured out how do you optimize your retirement. And his main premise was that you need to be able to have peace of mind knowing that your money's not going to run out, knowing that your money's not going to stop coming in the next month because of a market crash or a tenant that doesn't pay or whatever it is that happens outside of your control. Market forces, right? That's number one on the MITPG scale. Is that income subject to market forces? And so if it is, then you don't have the second piece of the retirement success puzzle, which is peace of mind. You can't sleep at night the way that you would like to because you don't have that guaranteed. So anyway, those are some of the thoughts that I wanted to share today as we dovetailed this conversation with inflation. Is one of the things that you got to think about. And so when we're looking at, okay, what are the assets we want to use? You want to use one that we call it income calibration. We've invented this process where we do like millions of calculations to figure out what is the best way to use the money that you've saved for retirement. And one of those is obviously going to be getting some of that guaranteed income from annuities and increasing income annuity type strategies.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something to, again, I always come back to my father, where we have the conversation, which is like, if he wouldn't have lost the money and we would have scientifically optimized the retirement, I wish I would have known back then what I know now. And so one of the main reasons why we're doing this podcast is we do want this information to get out. We're creating documentaries, we're writing books, and we're creating this podcast. So you now can get into your retirement mindset, as well as in potentially into your portfolio, that you might want to make some changes, make some pivots, if you will, to actually scientifically optimize that retirement and then calibrate the income. And so we also help with that. We would love to be able to work with people that are a right fit for us. And you can reach out and you go to vitafinancial.com and you can actually request a time that you can meet with us to be able to do that. And we would love to chat and see if we could help you out with something in terms of your retirement and helping you decumulate your assets so you can have more of that peace of mind.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it for the podcast today. Hopefully, this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next episode.